that Ashrafis are the ones who refused to bury them. And that was, again, the kind of issues that United Nations report never mention. And even if I mention it, it will never go beyond the office of the Special Representative of Secretary General, the SRSG. So this is let me be frank. It's Kobler, but also the previous ones also contributed into setting this kind of perception about the Ashrafis and perpetrated the perception and also the stigma. Of course, since the arrival of SRSG Kobler, things became so flagrant and so blatant that the United Nations is there to close down Camp Ashraf, and that was clearly done by the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding. But before the arrival of the SRSG Kobler, the previous one was clearly saying, and I could remember exactly on the 17th of May 2010, in a gathering of all the ambassadors in Baghdad, he told them that the UN agenda is so big in Iraq, and we don't want such a little item to undermine the whole business of the United Nations in Iraq. That was absolutely, it's on record, and it's documented. So the issue of why everybody stands against this, because al-Maliki has made it really a condition for any diplomat to sort of have access to him or to the whole administration. To have access to anything in Iraq, you have to go in line of the government's policy on Ashraf. So when an SRSG stands before all the diplomats and tells them a small issue like Ashraf is not going to be, well, I'm not going to allow it to undermine the whole agenda of the UN, you will see where injustice is done and how it's been perpetrated. The issue of fuel. The Iraqi government always said, we deliver, we give them enough fuel. The Ashrafis say, we don't receive fuel. So I need to go and visit and inspect the reservoirs. And as I said from the very beginning, the Ashrafis always turned out to be the right one in their allegations, which are not allegations, it's the reality. So this is, when we go back to report, there is also, we are employees of the United Nations. And most of us try to keep their job. They're not there to defend human rights. We are there to defend our jobs. So before I do anything, I have to make sure that my report will satisfy the SRSG. And I know that whatever I report, the report will be rewritten at what we call the front desk of the SRSG. So he's got his own staff who had never been out of that office. His staff don't know the situation on the ground. His staff never met any Ashrafi, and yet their words on those reports prevail over my reports coming from the ground. So whatever I report, it never reaches New York, it never reaches Washington. And what I'm saying applies to my counterparts within the American embassy, because we visit the camp together. We report objectively what we saw and what we heard. And yet, New York and Washington never receive the reports that reflect the reality on the ground, simply because at the level of the United Nations, the SRG's office, the Special Representative of Secretary General's office, will reshape the whole thing and put it the way it should be done, because we are there to report and to keep everybody happy. When the al-Maliki is happy, the Secretary General of the United Nations is happy. This is a reality, and Kobler has been congratulated during the Arab League summit in Baghdad, and he said to us that he is my best SRG. Because he's, to the world, he said, because he's keeping al-Maliki happy. So now the United Nations has become an instrument in the hands of the government of Iraq to fulfill their policies the way they see them and the way they conceive them. We are there as an instrument. And this is an instrument that is not sort of hidden. The Security Council Resolution 1770, 2007, said clearly that UNAMI is there to assist the government of Iraq upon its request. So it's only when al-Maliki say, I need your help on that issue, that we intervene. And this is why in Ashraf, we have to do exactly what al-Maliki needs to do. And if al-Maliki is not happy, the SRG will go. And this is what happened to Melkert. Ad Melkert his contract was not renewed because he stood for himself but the elections. Al-Maliki wanted to recount the elections, and he was not happy that Ayad Allawi had more seats than him. Ayad Allawi had 91, he had 89. So he wanted to recount that. SRG Melkert said no. The Electoral Commission said it's fair and just, and we're not going to recount. That was the end of the SRG. Al-Maliki told Ban Ki-moon he doesn't want to see him again in the mission, and that was the end. So now, of course, Kobler, with his ambitions, he will do exactly what Maliki wants. If he does otherwise, he has his predecessor's experience in front of him as a guide. So just to probably conclude, I would say that we contributed into perpetuating the stigma against the Ashrafis. The other thing is one of the fundamental issues that UNAMI has perpetrated and violated is the presumption of innocence. My office is the office that is there to defend the fundamental human rights of everybody. And everybody is presumed innocent till condemned by court of law and went through all the necessary procedures, what is called the due process of law. In the case of Ashraf, we have reversed this fundamental principle. And I could tell you, any report, any employee of the United Nations in Iraq presumes that Ashrafis are terrorists and they are left to prove their innocence. So, if that is done by a government, we would say that is probably the practice of that government. But for the United Nations to reverse the rule and make the presumption of guilt as a fundamental rule, that is unacceptable. And we did report everywhere saying that this has to stop. Presumption of guilt has to stop. And after all, the Ashrafis, when they were delisted from the list, whether in Europe or in America, they were delisted by courts of law. It was not political decision, it was judicial one, which means that the presumption of guilt has been removed by court of law. And this is where the Ashrafis have been victorious, because wherever their issues are put to a court, they were the winners. I thank you very much for that attention.